Well, hello, welcome to St Helier in the heart of Jersey, and I've been set a challenge today. I'm very aware Jersey, as well as being a beautiful island, is a smart island. There is technological and data connections everywhere you look, from the smart meter in my home to the technology in this bike. One click of an app and this bike is now my rental bike for the day. The perfect way to go exploring to see how technology makes Jersey one of the smartest places on the planet. That might look like just another control tower, but in there something very clever happening. The first virtual control tower that's registered for use in the British Isles, 13 Ultra HD plasma screens, a 240-degree panoramic view for the air traffic controllers, meaning they could be there or frankly set up anywhere in the world and able to control the movements of the aircraft. Now that's smart. Okay, this really is a wow moment. This is your office. You get to see this every day. Please tell me you don't take this for granted, Paul.
You get used to it, but it's still a privilege to have the view. It's the best view in the island. It's the highest office in the island, I believe.
A control tower as I would know a control tower, but somewhere away from here, there's something very clever happening. What is it?
That'll be our digital tower, our remote tower. On this tower, we have high-definition cameras arranged to create a 240-degree panorama.
As I understand it, this thing gets really sci-fi. You can overlay other data.
That's correct, yeah. So currently we have, if you like, map overlays. So we have overlays of the airfield on the screen.
In effect, you could connect to any airfield on the planet, and you could be anybody's virtual control tower.
Absolutely. In theory, yeah. As long as you have the connectivity, which we do here in Jersey with the fibre and the bandwidth, you can send that data literally from anywhere in the planet, yeah.
So come on, be honest with me. You're an air traffic controller. You deliver stuff in your calm voice that we love you for, Paul. When you've got all this technology, even you must get excited.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the future in many respects, so yeah.
It's mind-blowing stuff. Paul, for now, from virtual reality to reality, I'm going to enjoy this view. What a view! And Jersey really is a smart island when it comes to transport. There are monitors under the roads checking the flow of traffic. That's also matched with the traffic lights themselves. There's a parking app knowing who's parking where and when. There's a bus tracker, and even on the cycle lanes, underneath the path, more monitors knowing who's going where and when to try and keep everything flowing freely at all times. James, good to see you. I'm even better now you've got the copies in.
You're very welcome.
Right, here we are. That's a smart building.
Yes.
What makes it a smart building?
So there's actually a few things that make these buildings collectively quite smart. All of the windows are triple glazed. We've got photovoltaic panels actually on the roofs around, creating energy for the building itself to consume, a CO2 controlled ventilation system, as well as grey and rainwater recycling systems.
It's one big living, breathing computer that's reacting to life.
That's right. So also beneath the surface is the building management system, and that allows you to monitor and also control the building. This data is usually just consumed by facilities management and those that perhaps own or lease the building. But how you communicate that to those actually using the building is really key. So here, they're looking at putting smart meters on each floor, so people that are actually working up there can understand how much energy the building's using on any particular day, how much energy is being produced by these cells on the roof, and how much water is being used as well.
They could even have inter-floor, inter-office competitions to become the most energy efficient.
They could do. Would that motivate you?
I'm temptable, having seen it. Now this is very clever. Up there is an air sensor on the side of a school, and this is the first hyperlocal, real-time air quality monitoring network of an entire jurisdiction in the world. Just think of the smart opportunities that offers up. Right, time for a quick pit stop at home. Something very clever just behind my front door I need to tell you about. First though, priorities. I need to put the kettle on. So Jersey Electricity has just completed a major project. That means Jersey is the first jurisdiction in the British Isles to have smart meters in all homes, all 51,000 of them. It means no more estimated bills, no more having to ring an engineer, and much more information to help drive energy efficiency. I'll get to that. Andrew, good to see you. What on earth is this?
Well, this is one of JT's 4 data centres it's got in the Channel Islands. Would you like to come and have a look?
I'd love to.
Follow me.
But Andrew, racks and racks galore. It looks like one big computer to me. What's actually going on inside here?
All of those racks are individual clients. So some of those clients are located in Jersey, some are in Guernsey, and the others are all over the world. So we actually give the security and the environment. So we're looking after the temperature, the humidity, reliant power. And as you've seen, we've got security guards and cameras and alarm systems. So basically, the larger your requirement, the larger the space we offer.
And when I use the JT Cloud, I'm actually using your data center.
Exactly, yes. As you've seen with the lights inside there, that is JT's cloud. So we actually have a cloud in Jersey and in Guernsey.
I've been finding out about a smart island. You're telling me this is smart data?
Definitely, that's a great way of referring to it.
Well, that was just fascinating. There's so much about data and cloud computing I always take for granted, and now I know how it happens. And now it's time for me to get smart over a snack. Let's have a look at how technology is keeping Jersey COVID safe in the hospitality industry. So as I arrive, of course, the first thing I do is sanitize, but then I register with the track and trace system, dead easy, on my mobile phone, scan the QR code, we are good to go. Then, this is clever, a digital temperature check. It's a green light. It means I can go to my table. Wow, how's that for service? The coffee I ordered is already here. Dominic, good to see you. It feels like technology is all around us. How's it going?
It absolutely is, Gary. And, you know, it's something that we were planning to do before COVID anyway. And COVID has just helped us accelerate, and hopefully it's helped customers adapt more quickly to technology. But this is something that's not going to go away after COVID. We're going to keep it. We just might not wrap your cutlery afterwards, and we might not have you checking your temperature.
And from a technology perspective, there's a lot of clever stuff going on behind the scenes, because as I'm ordering food, you're measuring your stock controls automatically.
Part of the digital bit that goes on behind, you don't really want to see that, but it's an important part of us being efficient. And if we're efficient, it means we can be more productive. If we're more productive, we're more profitable. And the profit isn't just for us, it's for our customers as well. We can spend it on the things that matter.
Dominic, thank you. I appreciated the coffee. I've got to go and cycle on. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye, Gary.
And that brings my day on an EVie bike to an end. But it's not the end of the EVie story, because I'm about to meet the man behind this pretty incredible business. Gavin, great to see you. Right, let's try out one of these EVie cars. Off we go. So Gavin, I've tried the bikes, I'm in the car, but let's start at the start. What is EVie?
The big inspiration was to try and turn Jersey electric. We launched with the cars last December, but it struck us, given the difficulty we had finding car parking spaces to put the cars, that it'd be far easier for us to introduce a dockless bike scheme. be launching a new joined-up app, which allows us to make bikes and cars and any other shared vehicle available to the EV user.
I have one app that is in effect vehicle agnostic. Whatever I want, whenever I want it, I can just get it in one place.
Correct. And more than just vehicles which we buy and run, what we'd love to be able to do is to integrate the bus timetable and bus ticketing into that app as well. Things are changing fast elsewhere, and we need to, in Jersey and Ireland of 9x5, we have the wherewithal and the capability of being faster.
You're not the only electric evangelist. I know Jersey Post, they've changed their fleet over as well. They're doing like you're doing and seeing the future.
Yeah, one of the first people I went to see before we started the EV car was Darren Moon, who's the fleet manager down at Jersey Post, to understand some of the numbers behind the efficiencies of an electric vehicle versus a diesel vehicle. Jersey Post was led the way in Jersey.
So Gavin, we are on the home straight of my journey. I just want to thank you. It's a good experience, isn't it?
It's a great experience, and this may be the end journey, but actually we're coming up to the digital hub, and this was the beginning of my journey. So a lot of the early ideas, a lot of the early help were given by the guys working in the hub, and I'll be very grateful to them for a very long time.
Well, I'm off to meet them right now because Jersey Tech Week well and truly is on. Gavin, it's been a pleasure, and I'll see you soon.
Very lovely to see you. Thank you.
Right, let's get on with the rest of the day. Oh, well, I don't know about you, but I've had a particularly busy morning, and if you've been eagle-eyed so far, you might have spotted I've got myself through 3 coffees already, which means I am officially energized and ready to go for the final day of Jersey Tech Week. A very good morning to you. We're having a day, as you might have gathered by now, focusing on smart islands. So let's take a look at precisely what's in store for you over the course of the next couple of hours. In just a moment, we'll be talking to Joel Mills about digital twins, finding out more about that. And then we're going to look how data collection can be used to help influence telecoms infrastructure for everybody's benefit. We'll have a focus on a smart, sustainable cities initiative. We'll also be hearing from the government of Jersey on their policy perspective when it comes to all things smart. We'll be looking at more digital data later this morning, and we'll recap the day with JT as well, because I suspect there is an awful lot for us to be talking about. But let's begin with our first session of the morning. The CEO of Offshore Simulator Centre, Joel Mills, is with us now. Oh, there he is. Nice blinds as well. Joel, a very good morning. How are you?
Very good. Shame I can't be with you in person, but I'm very glad I can join anyway. So it's great to be there and be part of this interesting programme we've got going on this week.
Do you know what? We don't even need to call it the next best thing, because by merging virtual and physical, we've got the best of all worlds. So listen, it's over to you. You're a smart man. Let's make us all smarter.
Great. No, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm talking to you here from Norway, and today I'm going to talk about technology. But it's not actually about technology. All of the things that Gary's talked about are different methods of technology and how technology can help us. And it's actually about people. There's no point in doing all these different solutions unless we can help people. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about. But I first of all want to talk a little bit about what's happened with computers and what's happened with technology. So I'm going to give you a little introduction first, and then I'm going to explain how this works.
Computers. At first, computers struggled, but then they started winning.
Blue has defeated world champion Gary Burgess in an absolutely stunning.
And now they've become so dominant that they're raising doubts about the future of humanity. AlphaGo, an AI program that's become unbeatable at the most complex strategy game on the planet. While the game of checkers has 10 to the power of 20 possible outcomes, and a game of chess has 10 to the power of 40 possible outcomes, Go has more than 10 to the power of 80 possible outcomes. AlphaGo is trained to analyze situations itself by breaking the game down into tiny parts and visualizing all possible moves.
So computers are pretty smart. If we go back to the 90s was the first time a computer was actually able to beat us as humans. And they were able to process things faster, and they were able to beat us in the world master in chess. Computers are amazing at data processing, and they're getting better and better, and we cannot compete with them, and we don't need to compete with them. But us as humans, we are better at graphics. We're really good at graphics, and we have been built to understand things in a graphical way. You look at the picture at the bottom right-hand corner there, you see the most powerful computers are looking at graphical images, looking at 3D things we're aware of, and they struggle and they use the most power they can to detect just the difference between a human and a car. I can pick out the person's shoe on that picture without even thinking about it. Humans are designed to work with a graphical world. Machines are designed to work with a data world. What we need to do is put these things together. As I said, we're not just good at understanding a graphics world, but we're really good at evaluating risk with that graphics world and understanding how we can put that risk and understand taking that forward. I always love this phrase, an image is worth 1,000 words. And I say, well, if an image is worth 1,000 words, how many words is a simulation? And then what I want to say is, everybody's scared of machines. Machines are very, very good at the things machines are good at. Humans are very good at the things we're good at. What we need to do is we need to put these together, and then we're unstoppable. In this case, I showed you the chessboard was the interface between the machine and the human. What we're going to show you now is how a digital twin of the whole of the island is the same as the chessboard. It is the interface between all these different data sources and humans. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to talk to you about how these digital twins are built up and how they can change the world. So I've got here examples of many, many different digital twins, and you're able to see that we're able to put them together. And not only are we able to build up digital twins of all these different cities, but from one digital twin to the next, we can learn from those digital twins, and we can understand how those digital twins are able to help us. And one city can develop a solution and share that with the next, and share it with the next. So it is allowing not only the cities to bring in all the different inputs they can and have an overview themselves, but it's allowing us to share data between different cities and between different countries to really speed up the solutions. Now, we're in the early stages of this, and at the moment we've got 15 cities we're prototyping with, and we chose to work with Jersey as one of the key cities to test out these technologies. Now, what I want to do is really fast. I'm just going to use a few seconds on each project. There's lots of projects going on, but I'm going to give you just a taste of different projects which we're working on in this early stage to show you how this can be used for all sorts of different areas. So we've used it to develop and see solutions for new bridges, which can be done in cities in Norway. We've looked at how this can go into coming up with new technologies for bridges, looking at floating solutions and how these can be used to make things faster, quicker, and more efficient. We're using it for understanding how new building projects can work and how maybe you want to share and understand what's going on in new building projects. So if a new house is going to be built in the area from you, you want to understand if that's going to hurt your view or how it's going to look. You, instead of just getting 2D drawings, which are difficult for people to understand, you can fly and you can place it directly within the situation and understand all the details around that. This is a project we're working up in slightly towards the north of Norway, and they're building a very big brand new hospital, and it is actually going to be placed, instead of in one hospital, it's going to replace two old hospitals, and it's going to be placed between two cities. Now, this is a compromise, and it's a huge logistical nightmare. So they need to take 2,400 employees to and from this building every day from two different cities. And then they need to bring in all of the people who need healthcare from all these different cities. And understanding how that can work is a very, very complicated situation. This is also going to be a very environmentally friendly building where you can see there is grass on the roofs and it's put into the system. So it's going to be a very, very smart building. And I'll come back talking more about smart buildings later. Here we're looking at school requirements. So we've been able to take statistics data, understanding the growth of population and understanding what the requirements will be for schools in the future. Now, some of this focus has been looking at understanding where you might need a school now, but actually what's really interesting is by the time a school has been built, maybe it's too late. Maybe then you should be looking at not a primary school or a secondary school, but maybe a university, or maybe even to the extent of an old people's home. So it's understanding how the population is changing and how you can be ready, so you're not acting as reactive, but proactive with all of the things you're working with. Here we're looking at traffic flow and really understanding traffic flow live from data. And I'll come back to this a little bit more, because this is where we've been working quite heavily, not just with the roads authorities, but also with the telcos. This we've heard, and we know that Jersey has their own app-based parking. We're working with one of the largest app-based parking providers. So they've got app-based solutions in over 1,600 cities across the whole of Europe. And we're able to take in that data, understand how people are working and how people are using parking to make their experience better. Nobody wants to drive round and round a city trying to find a parking space. You want an easy solution and for your life to be better. And that's what technology is about here, making everybody's lives better and being able to share this data in an anonymous way, in a big scale way, to be able to make better solutions. We've heard about shared bikes in Jersey. We're also looking at this across a lot of cities across the world. And here's some examples where we're not just looking at the solutions now, but the solutions in the future. And I will come back to this also about work directly with the United Nations and how we can meet the goals of the United Nations for what is a smart, sustainable city of the future. CO2, we've done an analysis of some of the cities across Norway, but we've also done it with Jersey, where we've started to understand what are the largest contributors to CO2 and actually what can be done, and realise that offsetting CO2 in a lot of the cities we're working with, including Jersey, isn't an option. We've got to find methods of cutting down that CO2, and there are so many initiatives already on their way to really help move these things forward. Pilot T is a massive government project which is running with 120 million Norwegian kroner put in to really start to find new transport solutions which can be used across all cities. They're being piloted at the moment in Oslo, Bergen and some of the larger cities in Norway. But the idea is to take this forward, and we're looking for not just understanding the traffic, but understanding people. Why does somebody want to go from A to B? And I'll come back to that as well, because that's a very, very interesting point. Here, this is taking data, and it's part of this Pilot T project, where we're working directly with the mobile phone operators. They are able to take out data from everybody's smartphones, understanding where everybody is moving around. We're able to understand the speed that people are moving around. So if they're in a car or if they're in a bicycle, all of that data is made anonymous. None of that is in the state of an individual person, but then we're able to feed it into complex models to understand live what's going on and also make details of how we can feed that through. This is a project looking at one of the largest primary schools to be built in Norway, and we've taken this right from the early stage to understand exactly how it's going to fit into the terrain. This has been used at a very high level, at a government level, to understand and to share the ideas of how it's been put in. So we bring it in from the architect's models, place it into the landscape, and then we can look at all of the different aspects of it. So we can look at the flow of students in and out of the school. We can look at the safety aspects. We can look at the way the school works as an individual building, but also how that works as part of a bigger network. So we're able to see all the different parts through that. This is a large business park which is being built outside of one of the cities, and we're able to not only look at all of the logistics sides, but they're also looking at how renewable energies can be used to exchange power between the different buildings, and how large solar power and power in from the fjord using the standard temperatures for heat pumps in the fjord can share energy between all of the systems here to make a much smarter solution in the future. This is a new campus which is being built in the city of Kristiansund, and here they are looking at how they can bring business more and more into the city centre and really regenerate an area with smart, a hub just like we see with Digital Jersey, but connecting in a lot of the key businesses around and building it up so it's part of the whole logistics chain of the full city. And we've come in very, very early in the stage here to understand how we can facilitate this and link it into the bigger picture of what's going on with the whole city. I've jumped to the UK now, and this is a large project we're doing. We're actually delivering the National Decommissioning Centre for the whole of the UK, looking at decommissioning all of the offshore gas, oil and gas facilities. But as part of this, we've built up a whole digital twin of the city of Aberdeen, and we've also built up a digital twin of the new harbour. Now, the new harbour is estimated to contribute to the economy nearly £1 billion, and also look at creating additional 7,000 jobs. Now, we're understanding how all of that logistics chain is going to work, from bringing all of this equipment offshore to land, decommissioning it, moving it through the city, and understanding all the components about this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Jersey Harbour later, but just to say we're working on this with a number of different cities. Here's an airport. And this is Border Airport. This is actually very north. This is just north of the Arctic Circle. It is a city which gets midnight sun, a very special place to visit, and I can highly recommend it. It's been voted that it will be Europe's capital of culture for 2024. And they are beginning a massive project of moving the whole airport. The airport was a military airport. It has a huge amount of visitors, and they need to move it a kilometre over to the right to allow the city to expand and allow things to move forward. This is an investment of nearly 700 million US dollars. And we're able to put this in and plan and work through all the scenarios in a digital twin before it is ever put in place. I'll show you a short video, but I'm not going to show you much of this because, as I said, I want to just give you tastes of a number of different projects. And if there's something which clicks your interest, you can come and ask us a little bit about it and how we could look at it in Jersey or in other cities around the world. So this is looking a little bit about how the city is at the moment, and we're starting to move and understand all the different parts of it. And we're able to put in all these different data sets from all the different people. Gary at the beginning talked to you a lot about visiting all those different people and how the value of all of those different things were giving feedback into the economy and to move things forward and make things better for us to work with. Imagine if you can put all of those together and understand the ways they work together. This is a project we've been doing in collaboration with the largest Norwegian university and the Norwegian government, and it is the most famous fjord in the world. It is called the Geiranger Fjord, and it is a very, very beautiful place. And after the corona crisis, I can highly recommend a cruise or a visit over here. It'd be a very nice place to visit. But it does have a problem because it's got high sides. Any pollution created on a still day is kept within that fjord, and we wanted to understand exactly what was going on with the pollution. So we were able to do very, very deep analysis into understanding all of the different contributors to the pollution to understand what we could do to find quick wins and to move things forward. This is part of the big road network system which is being done, which is looking at moving away from ferries and moving more and more to road-based solutions. And this is another solution which is looking at a floating bridge, but it was understanding how cruise boats could go between that floating bridge. And we were able to do very high-level simulation solutions to understand exactly the best ways to do it. And actually, just last week, we showed that the current design has got some major flaws, and we're going to a hybrid design now, which will allow a much better solution, which is a massive cost saving in being able to go for those sorts of directions. Movement of people. Now, if we're to understand, and if we're really to come through this COVID crisis, we need to understand what we're doing and where our risks are and being able to follow all of these details. Now, we've been working together with the government of Norway. We've been working with all of the cities across Norway, and we've been working with the telco operators, with the roads authorities, and we've been able to track and understand the movements of people to understand exactly what's going to go on. And I'm just going to show you a little video of this. So this is the city of Alderson. We've done this for many cities, but here we're taking in data from the roads. You heard that you've got sensors in your road in Jersey. We've got sensors in the Norwegian cities exactly the same, which allow us to understand that. We're also seeing the flow of people, and we begin to see that there was a great big drop in the movement of people after lockdown, which was great, but we saw there was a big increase in the tourist areas and the areas where people would go in the evenings. We also saw that there was a big increase in people travelling around at night time because they'd been stuck in their house all evenings. So it's very important to understand what's going on so we can make sure that we can find the best solutions and react before there becomes an issue rather than reacting as a reaction afterwards, so we can be proactive rather than reactive. So all of this data allows us to have a full overview of what's going on and how we can solve things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project and come into a project in quite a lot of more detail. I've whizzed through 20 projects in just a few minutes, and I know that you've probably, your head is about to explode, but I just wanted you to have a taste of what can be done. And if there's one thing in there which triggers your interest, then please come and talk with Digital Jersey and have a chat with us, and we can show you what can be done through the simulation solutions. So here I'm going to talk to you directly about one solution we've been looking at with a city. And this was building up of a big new sports arena directly in the middle of the city. And they knew that it was the best place for the arena, but they knew that they're going to have big problems with traffic and parking. Now we started to take in all sorts of data, and we didn't just take in your standard data of your traffic data and parking data, but we also took in demographic data. So we understood exactly where people were living. We understood all the weather patterns, and we understood how people travel during different times of year. We brought in the public transport data. We also went to the stage that we went into all the shops in the area, and we started to get the data from the tills, of course, or anonymous data, to understand what types of day they were busy and where they were seeing the most use of the shops, and then connecting to that the movement of people coming to and from those shops. We were also lucky enough to be able to get the anonymous data on all the people using these facilities. And what we found out that the majority of the use of the sports arena was actually going to be in evening time. And we very quickly found there were some major easy wins. For example, exactly where the sports arena was, the buses to that area stopped at 5 o'clock. Although most activity was happening in the evening, there was no buses taking you to that area after 5 in the evening, which was a very easy win to be able to change things. So we brought this in and we were able to analyse, and this is just showing a couple of it, but it's showing when we actually brought in not just the road sensors, but we were able to bring in mobile sensors to really analyse traffic over time and get an idea of how traffic was moving around this area. We were also able to look at the distances to different parking facilities and understand the number of parking places those different facilities had. Once we'd done this, we were able to graph and really have a very, very fine idea of all the different things which are going on and try out, simulate different solutions and see which impact they would have. So the red line you're seeing there on the graph is able to show us the capacity of parking within a sensible distance for walking. Then we looked at the problem with no restriction at all, and we saw that we actually had a major problem with parking. We actually needed nearly double the parking spaces we actually had today. So we looked at some standard solutions which have been just discussed, which said that people within certain postcode areas would not be able to drive to their activities, but would have to walk or cycle or use other methods of transport. And they had an effect, but they didn't solve the problem. We were still going over the capacity. So we started to understand why people were taking these journeys and how they were taking the journeys and how the whole system was built up. And this is where a digital twin cannot be beaten. It's this idea of not just seeing one individual aspect, but it's the idea of seeing all of the contributing factors which make a problem. The standard solution to a capacity of a parking problem is either to say people can't drive or to say we need more parking. What we started to do here is we started to understand the way people were using this, and a lot of the activities which were going on in the evening, what we realized is that one activity was finishing and the next activity was starting exactly at the same time. So there was a major overlap where you were actually needing double the parking capacity because you were having drop-off and pick-up at the same time. We started to do some simulations to understand how we could divide this up. And we put in a situation where we had a slight gap between drop-off and pick-up. And in doing this, we were able to halve the requirement for parking. This isn't going to be the final solution. We're also looking at a number of other things which we can do on top of this, but really understanding the full picture allows you to think in a much smarter way. And actually, humans still today are much better at thinking of novel solutions and ways to do this if the data can be presented in a way that humans can understand. So it's all about taking that data that humans can understand, put it into a visual format, connect machines to humans, and really push us forward to being able to understand exactly how we can have that interface. So I'm going to come back shortly and talk to you a little bit more about other uses of the digital twin, how it can be used in the government side, how it can be used, and come into some more detailed examples. But I think I'm about ready to hand back to the hub for them to take things forward from here. So I'm going to pass back over to Gary.
Joel, thank you so much. I have to say, every minute of that has expanded my mind. First of all, my most basic consumer level responses, it makes me realise how far we've come from Flight Simulator on the ZX Spectrum in 1983. But just as you look at project after project and consider the possibilities, I mean, if there was an island about to build a brand new hospital, all the possibilities that having this smart island infrastructure and layer upon layer upon layer of data offers is absolutely incredible. And then for decision makers who perhaps don't understand the data, to see it visualized like that, it just makes sense. However, how do we get from A to B? We need to use the IoT. We need to use our telecoms infrastructure to be able to drive that data and capture that essential information. Well, that is where our next guest comes in. Jon Collinson, the head of product at JT Global. A very good morning to you, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you for the introduction. And it's great to be here in person at this visual conference. My name is Jon Collinson, as Gary has said, and I head up the product function at Jersey Telecom. My main focus is on the Channel Islands, but some of you might not know that Jersey Telecom also has a major IoT business internationally. In this area, we manage SIMs and eSIMs in over 10 million devices around the world, connecting various applications to companies who use that data for their own business needs. And these are applications as broad as irrigation monitoring in the United States, vehicle tracking, smart meters in Europe and Africa, as we've heard about before, and also e-health, monitoring health outcomes in Canada. Our focus in that particular case is on the system that connects huge numbers, huge volumes of connections of individual items into an infrastructure so that those businesses can concentrate on what they do best, which is creating their own businesses. Thanks to Joel for the introduction also to digital twinning. We first met probably about this time last year when Digital Jersey invited us together for a round table here at the DJ Hub in St Helier to talk about bringing some of the exciting simulation and visualization techniques that Joel presented to Jersey as part of the Digital Twin project, which JT is happy to sponsor on Ireland. Of course, there's a huge amount of data that's required there. These systems have a voracious appetite for data, huge variety of data from a number of different sources from all over the place. And of course, there is the velocity of that data. These are the 3 V's of big data, how you can get that data as quickly as possible from the sensor, from the device to the system that is going to report on it. So I'd like to take you on a quick guide through the communications infrastructure we have on Jersey to collect that data, to bring it together for people to use, how we are actually using that data a bit ourselves, how we can improve our services and in fact offer new services in the smart island environment for the good of Jersey as a whole. And finally, how we can optimize the infrastructure using data to improve businesses and network efficiencies. Our route to fibre has been, we've talked about it quite a lot. In fact, a lot of people have mentioned it practically during every session I've seen so far during this week. Those of you outside the island, as you buffer your way through a lot of presentations, are probably sick to death of hearing about how great the infrastructure is here on Jersey. But it is an important part of the overall picture. You cannot create a smart environment, whether it's a smart city or a smart island, without that basic infrastructure. And we started it like a lot of in a lot of markets back in the 90s with dial-up internet, which progressed from analog lines to ISDN lines. About 20 years ago, we launched our first ADSL on the island, which took the big step from dial-up internet to always-on internet connections. About 10 years ago, I guess you couldn't have imagined sitting here in a hub like this talking about digital infrastructure, talking about the digital opportunities, or even imagining some of the things that Joel was presenting earlier. We were connected to an ADSL network, connecting at around 2 megabits per second, which I suppose some people might have thought was fast at the time, but certainly was quite limiting. It was at that time that JT took the decision not to invest in DSL, not to go to VDSL like has happened in quite a lot of other markets, but to focus rather on replacing its whole network with fibre. That is making fibre the default connection for everybody on the island to access the internet. At the time, that was probably a very brave and courageous decision to make. It might seem obvious now that we see the benefits of it. As Gary has said quite frequently, you only realize what you've got now that you're using it when you go somewhere else and you realize just how different the speeds can be in other areas. So we built this full fibre network. We gradually moved customers over. We migrated them automatically from the old service to the new fibre service without any charge at all, and gradually increased speeds during that time. And we reached, when we switched over to the full fibre network last year, in fact, the first jurisdiction to have a full fibre access network, we were offering as our base entry product 500 megabits download speed, 50 meg up, which is pretty good by any standards. But because we had designed the network on gigabit speeds, we were able quite easily to make the transition from 500 download to a gigabit symmetrical internet. And we made that, as was talked about earlier this week, in collaboration and discussions with Digital Jersey and the other operators on the island, recognizing that people were increasingly going to be working from home and have therefore different needs for bandwidth, for coverage in their home. Now, switching it from up to max, if you like, turning the dial up to max was quite easy because we'd already done that. We'd already created the gigabit capability. But of course, what we would like to do now is to reset that dial so that the 1 to 10 scale actually becomes 1 for 1 gig, and that we can move ultimately up to speeds of, say, 10 gig into the domestic environment. Because we've got a future-proof point-to-point fibre network, effectively that purely depends on what you attach at either end of the network. And of course, fibre in the home has created all sorts of interesting opportunities as people have started working from home more. We've seen, as Graham said earlier, a change in pattern of usage. So far more usage, of course, during the day, up to roughly the peaks that there were previously in the evening. But this has been through business applications as much as through domestic applications, consumer applications. So while, for example, Citrix say they've seen about a 300% increase in the use of their product by people working from home and using their corporate applications, we've also seen increases in, for example, access to our Netflix cache on Jersey, which has gone up by about 1/3 since March this year. So, of course, fibre is an important factor in all of that, and it's the basis for connectivity of a lot of other areas. We have mobile, obviously, connectivity connected by fibre on the island. The solid 4G infrastructure that we have on the island from all three operators has great capacity and speeds of up to around 300 megabits in ideal conditions. We're also testing 5G. Of course, you absolutely have to connect all your 5G base stations into a fiber network. There's no other way of doing it to take advantage of the speed and the latency requirements of 5G. And of course, there are other areas where we're making connectivity available. We have a full LoRa network on island. With Digital Jersey, we've been doing a number of tests with companies from on the island as well as off island to see what you can do with these new low power sensors and devices, where you can have battery life of over a year, for example, collecting data and feeding back into a system such as the ones we're talking about today to measure temperature, water conditions and so forth around the island. And of course, finally, as Gary pointed out in his video around the island, we have data centers on Ireland to keep as much on island as possible, to keep the speed of response as quick as possible, but also hosting services to make sure that anybody who wants to come and trial out their systems, their new products on Ireland, have access to world-class data centers and capabilities to test their applications on. Of course, we're very focused on smart islands as a whole. Having a ubiquitous fiber network encourages us to think about all sorts of other ways that we can bring the advantages of that to customers beyond just pure internet access. And I'd like to mention 3 examples of where we are increasing, if you like, the value of that fiber network to people. First of all, earlier this year, we bought a company called 01. This is a small local company here in the Channel Islands, but that specializes in the installation of automated solutions in homes and offices around the islands. This is everything from audio-visual suites to home cinemas to intelligent blinds, shading, lighting, all the way through to security and a number of other services. In fact, one of the latest ones that the 01 is exploring and implementing in a number of office implementations is smart energy management, where this can be connected into a central monitoring system just to check what's going on with energy use and the environment around it. Of course, 01 products and in fact all the other usage in the home places huge demands on broadband in the home. So many people working from home at the same time, accessing their broadband through typically Wi-Fi, are finding issues in getting the quality of service and in fact the speed that they might expect. Jersey also has a lot of granite built houses, which also gets in the way of Wi-Fi. And so a lot of people have been saying to us, it's great that you've increased the speed to 1 gigabit symmetrical, but actually we haven't seen the full benefit of that. I'm still only getting the same lower speeds on my iPhone or my tablet that I saw before. So we have launched, in fact, it was just only last month, a new managed Wi-Fi service for the home called JT Total Wi-Fi. And this is based around a service offered by Plume, which has a number of small pods, as you see here, which you can place around the home in strategic positions, and it creates an intelligent mesh of Wi-Fi around the home. This not only improves the speed that you can get wherever you are in the home, but the consistency of that speed. It includes an interesting feature called adaptive Wi-Fi, and this gets to know, it learns about how you're using your Wi-Fi, what the environment is like, and adjusts frequencies and channels accordingly to make sure that you're always getting the best from your connection. In Jersey, for example, we have quite a lot of interference, especially around the coast, from radar that's used for, in the maritime area, and that can sometimes conflict with some of the higher frequencies that are used for Wi-Fi. So again, the Plume system is aware of those and can adjust what's offered automatically. The third area is more in the business area, adding value to the gigabit fiber we've got at the moment. And this is what's called SD-WAN, Software Defined Wide Area Network. This is something that telecom operators have usually been a little wary of, because this was initially presented, particularly in the US, as a way to cut your connectivity costs. And who wants to encourage their customers to cut connectivity costs? Well, we certainly don't. But what this allows you to do, in fact, is put a new control layer on top of your various connection offers, whether it's private circuits, whether it's internet, or even mobile data, to use the best connection available at the time, the optimum connection available for particular applications you might have. And we see this as adding a significant amount of value to fibre, because with cost-effective gigabit fibre now the standard on the island, why wouldn't you want to use that far more in your business? And this offers the capability of making that access far more secure than it might have been before. And it also has the opportunity to move further into smaller businesses and even the working from home environment to bring corporate grade security to people working at home. Now, of course, data is all around us, and the telcos, as you all know, have huge amounts of data. We've been generating this for years. I remember when I was back at BT in the 90s, how excited we were at collecting call data. There weren't many other businesses that knew exactly when and how, to whom and for how long their consumers were actually using their product. Supermarkets were talking about creating new loyalty schemes just to try and link sales to individuals so that they could improve the offer they had. Well, of course, that's got a lot more complex now, and we collect data from a number of different sources. Unfortunately, I think I have to say that we're not probably the best organizations at exploiting that data, because it comes from so many different sources which have their own particular applications. So, for example, we get data from our internal CRM applications, billing applications. That's typically information about customers, about what they're using, their consumption, their billing, financial, and a few other user attributes. We also collect a huge amount of data from our network itself. It's pumping out data all the time, not just to feed things like the billing engine, but also to help us manage the network to make sure it's running optimally. And of course, we are continually upgrading our core network. It's a bit like painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. By the time you think you've finished it, you've got to start again. And you're constantly adding new systems, and each of those produces new sources of data which are of value to you as you manage your business. In fact, the two I presented before, the SD-WAN service and the Plume service, they both have incredibly powerful portals, dashboards, if you like, that you can go into and understand exactly how customers are using that particular product and how you can advise customers to use that product better. But the problem, of course, is these are all individual separated solutions, and they don't come together to give people like me, if you like, as product development, the overall insights that you might want into understanding how you can develop new products and services. It doesn't actually give a full view that might be of use to sales teams as they plan their customer activity, or even network people who might be planning the design of the new 5G network. So we're very interested by the visualization and the simulation capabilities that Joel was talking about before. This is for internal usage to make sure that we carry on working with our infrastructure to make it as efficient and as powerful as possible. But there's also opportunity to put a lot more data into the hands of customers. This is not just giving them smart access into online shopping or other smart ways of communicating with us. During lockdown, for example, we found a lot more people communicating with us via email and chat, which is all great. Their customer satisfaction figures have gone up because they are using a system that they feel getting far more and more comfortable with. But we're going to have interesting experience, I think, with Plume coming up, because Plume itself has a huge amount of data available to the customer. It's presented to the customer through an application where the customer themselves can manage their network. They can see what's going on, what speeds they're getting from us, how it's being used around their network, and discover whether there are particular areas of their home or particular devices which are not connecting properly. And that gives us a huge amount of QoE data about that particular household, so we can proactively advise customers about what they could do to improve their overall consumption of the service. This is all very, very interesting stuff. We've talked to a lot of operators who have implemented Plume. There are about 19 million users of the service around the world, and just about all of them talk about how the Plume service and the data given to customers to manage their own consumption has reduced support contacts and at the same time increased their satisfaction. So that sounds like a win-win situation for me. So that's, if you like, a summary of the environment where we are using data for our own purposes. Of course, since we've started talking about the Digital Twin project, we've been looking at how we can offer data from our systems to contribute to the Digital Twin project and ultimately into the simulation ideas that we saw before. Now, some of these might not be on the same sort of scale as Joel's presentation, which I'm sure was partly sponsored by the Norwegian Tourist Board, because there's so much great stuff going on up there, so much beautiful country as well. I think Gary's video earlier probably did the same for Jersey. But there's an awful lot of information there which can be of value to the island. He talked about how they're working with Telia, for example, their partner up in Norway, to understand how some of the raw data which we have in our network could be used and could be applied for the benefit of other people. We might not necessarily understand what that power might be or what that application might be, but if there are other people who can access that data to with a particular perspective for their own purposes, then we would like to certainly help them do that. And we'll continue our discussions and learning from Telia to try and find out how we can contribute to that. So that, in summary, is a far more down-to-earth tour, I suppose, than the visual simulations that Joel was talking before. I hope you found that of some interest. Certainly, the key thing I'd like you to take out from this is that the infrastructure in Jersey is key to the success of a smart island. All of the initiatives that go on top of it are exciting, but do rely on that as the basis of everything. As somebody put it earlier in the week, it's the oxygen of the innovation that's required for these kinds of services. So come to Jersey when you're allowed to. Try out our connectivity, experience the magic that Gary talks about. Try out your new ideas. This is a real environment where you can test your own ideas and gradually begin to work out exactly how you can create new products and services to launch in your own markets around the world. So thank you very much. Over to you, Gary.
Jon, thank you so much. Regardless of the formal title of your presentation, I think we should call that the Never Take Your Infrastructure for Granted presentation. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Let me just tell you a little bit about this afternoon. Our final session today at 3 o'clock is going to be launching the Jersey Tech Awards. So if you're not already signed up for that, get yourself signed up for that session. Just check out the Digital Jersey social media for all the links you need, because this afternoon is going to be very special. Back to this morning, though, we're keeping it smart.
Creating a language now here to work together on smart cities and sustainability. And I think with Jersey, we have a unique opportunity as an ecosystem to show an example for cities and communities all around the world.
And that means we can measure ourselves against what's happening around the world. And again, it's about looking at ourselves, but also enhancing our reputation abroad.
So, a face you are going to see more than once this morning, because quite frankly, we could hand over the whole morning to him. It is so interesting, is Joel. Joel, you are back. We are talking this time around about the Smart Cities Initiative and how islands indeed can plumb into those concepts. So it's straight back over to you, Joel.
Thank you very much. Yes, so very interesting. Thank you very much, Jon. It is absolutely key to anything working with any of this digital technology to have that infrastructure as the backbone. And you're in such a lucky situation in Jersey to have that fibre network and to have such integration to those strong telcos with a good drive and really pushing forward, and safe data, not just open, strong data, but then you being secure and happy that that data is controlled. You also saw in that quick little link video, you saw Carrie Ike, who is the General Secretary for the United Nations Programme for Smart Sustainable Cities. And I'm going to come to talk about that a little bit. But all of this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about KPIs, key performance indicators. And I'm going to start firstly on a building level, and then I'm going to go to a city level and explain how understanding and being able to benchmark where you are today allows you to make improvements. It might be small little improvements, it might be absolute game-changing improvements. One of the projects we've done here, and I'm afraid I'm going to keep on with another example from Norway here, but this is an example working together with the national building company, which is in charge of all national buildings. So we've been working with them to find a way to measure the performance of different buildings. So this is not in the building stage. This is after they're up and running and understanding exactly how we can optimize those buildings, not just to save money, but also to make them a better environment for people to work in. So what we've been looking at here is we've taken this, and as you can see, the Norwegian government buildings have got a strong control over a lot of government buildings, and they've built some of the world-class architecture buildings around the world. The Oslo Opera was by the famous architect Snøhetta, and is known across the globe as one of the most famous architecture pieces built in the last 10 years. And we've been working with them directly to understand exactly how we can measure different solutions. Now, more and more, you're able to take in sensors, and we've heard already about this from Gary in Jersey, about how buildings in Jersey are already having more and more sensors in them. Now, what we've done in this example project is we've looked at the city of Bergen. So we've modelled up the whole of the city of Bergen, and then with the city of Bergen, we've looked at the new art university. And the art university is divided into different parts, music and design. And the art and design part has got a brand new building which has been built, which again is an incredibly good building. The music is still working in the Greg Academy, which is an old building, but will shortly get a new building. But we've been able to analyse and take in all of the information which is within that building from sensors, which is great project, being able to censor and understand what's going on in that building, but making that into a method that humans can simply understand and evaluate and see what's going on is a really difficult thing. So what we've done is we've taken it up into a level where we've used what we call these KPIs to measure the buildings and understand what is working well, what is not working well, looking at electricity usage, like you heard in the Jersey example in the intro video, looking at the use of people, and when people are coming in and out of that building, again, anonymous, so we're not able to understand who that person is, but we're able to see that there are people flowing in and out of that building. So in this situation, this little example here, we're able to graph out and take in, and we're able to look at the people moving in and out of a certain room. We're able to look at the power consumption and the temperature. Now, this has been set up that the power is coming on early in the morning. You see it's coming on at around 7 o'clock, and you see the power going up, and you see the temperature going up to a nice level. And then you see the green as the people come in and out of that area. Now you see there's an area in the middle of the day where there's nobody in that room, but we're still holding the power and the temperature up. And then towards the end of the day, the temperature and the power starts to go down because the building's going back into a sleep modus. But actually at that point, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's not so surprising that this is an art building used by art students, that actually they're quite keen to come and work in the evening. So we actually see some use of the building in the evening where the students using that building aren't very happy because if they are in a cold environment in the end of the evening, and they're not able to be able to be in a comfortable situation. But actually understanding that building and managing those, we can set things up in a way where we can actually have a solution which able to save money and give a better setup with that. So here we're talking about breaking down those barriers between the humans and machines. We're talking about fast tracking new technologies. So bringing new technologies or even existing technologies which are there and have been there for a while, but they haven't actually come to a point that they're so easy to use that they're being used in every day. And we're talking about a total win-win. So we're talking about a better environment for people, but also able to save cost and time. And it's amazing in a lot of these cases we work with, how easy it is when we start to bring in the data and visualize and have visualization and simulation behind that data, how many possibilities there are for us to make things better. So that's an example on a building level. I now want to go to a city level and to a country level and to a global level. Now, we've been working from day one in very tight collaboration with the United Nations. And this is about making a better world for all of us, it's making more sustainable cities, not just smart cities, but more sustainable cities, and being able to find methods to really improve, share data between cities to make things better. So this is 17 of the UN organizations have come together and spent some time making 92 key performance indicators which you're able to measure a city based on. So these key performance indicators, we're able to understand exactly where a city is and benchmark where it is today. How can we hope to be better if we don't know where we are today? So in this system, this has been around only for a short period of time, and with working with the UN, we were able to choose Jersey and work with Jersey as one of the first in this program. So there's actually 250 cities which have been evaluated so far. Jersey is just in the beginning process. Jersey will be the first UK city. There's others in the list, but Jersey will be the first UK city to have this United Nations U4SSC, so United for Smart Sustainable Cities evaluation progress. And it is the first island in the world. So we're actually looking to take this out to a number of islands in the Caribbean, which we're starting to work on. But Jersey is the first island in the world to be able to test this. So we're very excited to be able to work with Jersey in doing this. Now, these key performance indicators, what's the point of them? The point is to be able to have a clear overview of where the whole of the city, or in your case, the island, is and how it's working. So we have a large number of cities around the world, but I'm afraid I'm going to keep some of my examples based on Norway today, because I've got some videos for those to show. And I'm going to compare that. So on the left-hand side there, you see the finished, complete rows diagram showing all of the different KPIs, which is the outer ring, which as we click on, we can zoom in and see the details of that. And the left-hand side there is for the city of Ålesund, and that is complete. If you look on the right-hand side, that is Jersey as we are today. So we're still bringing in data from different data sources to be able to look at this and understand exactly what's going on. So here we start off with the city of Ålesund and the KPI sitting on the middle of the city, and we're able to click into that. And as we click into that, it's able to expand out and look in the different areas. So it starts with society, environment, and economy. And as we click into that, we're able to break down. Now here we show Jersey. And actually what we're showing in this video here is all of every parish with the demographic data. So this is the data of all the different people within each parish and how they're broken up by ages, so we can understand the whole breakdown of the system within Jersey. Now we've also brought in the KPI of Jersey, and we're going to talk to you a lot more in detail about this later and how this can be used for governments to make decisions by understanding where they're good and where they're bad. And you already see in the bottom right-hand corner there, you see an area which I'll come in and talk a little bit more about later, which is transport. And under transport, we see that we've got a number of red areas where we're not meeting the United Nations goals for where a city should be. Now, some areas, obviously Jersey will be very good in on a global level, but it's very, very good to have a global perspective. Just because an island like Jersey, even if you do get to the stage of being able to hit
Well, Joel, I tell you what, I was right in the middle of that and then you disappeared. I think we might just have you back. I've put a fresh elastic band on my wheel at this end. Thankfully, we don't need that because we have the infrastructure in place to rejoin you. So Joel, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I was just finishing off with this section and we're going to pass over to government where they're going to talk about how they're using different solutions, and we very much hope that we can have a very tight connection with the government moving forward using this KPIs to understand all of the systems. So we're linking, and we see the digital twin to be a bridge between all of the industries, between the individuals, every person in every house out there, the government, and academia. So we're using one common area where all data can be brought in from different areas, understand where we are today, understand where we've got the easy wins where we can make a difference, and understand how we can make move things forward. We hear a lot about people talking about working in silos. The whole idea here with this digital twin solution is we can break away from those silos and we can see how we can interconnect all of these different areas to make better decisions. We can also make it so we're not basing decisions on gut feeling, or we're basing decisions on fake news. Everything is transparent. People are able to understand why a decision is being made, and sometimes decisions have to be a compromise. But if the public and everybody else can see why a solution is better to be done in one place or another, or how things can be moved forward, we can base things based on data and real fact, rather than the person who's shouting loudest in one corner. So I think this is a very, very useful tool for governments. It's a very useful tool for decision makers. Nobody wants to read a 300-page report on one aspect or something else. We're getting more and more to the stage where we have super experts which are incredibly good at their jobs, but that means we need to be able to feed those expert reports into a format that everybody can understand, so we can make those decisions based on those real solutions. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Gary, who's then going to talk and pass over to government, and I'm going to join you again. So I'm afraid you're not rid of me yet. I've got more things to talk about, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about electric vehicles and come back to the EV stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit also about ports. But before I do that, I'm going to pass back over to Gary. So thank you very much for now.
Joel, thank you so much. I feel like we're getting our money's worth out of you today, and I'm delighted we're touching on electric vehicles later on, because heading out on my EVie bike and driving in the EV car earlier was certainly a wonderful experience as I learned more about smart islands. Right, let's continue our conversation. As Joel hinted there, we need to get the perspective of government in all of this as well, and how policy is shaped by all we're hearing about smart islands today. The official title, Director of Strategy and Innovation, but of course we've met him already this week. We simply know him as Steve. Steve Skelton, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gary. And yeah, really pleased to be back, this time with the aid of a few slides and a little bit more structure in the presentation. So hopefully picking up from a number of things you've heard this morning, and also sort of trying to explain a little bit of how the parts of government that might make use of these smart island tools, digital twins, try and accommodate those, how they think, and some of the work that we do. So I'm going to take a little bit of a tour through some of the challenges of making public policy in this space, and then I'm going to come back to that question on the screen now of how can digital twins transform public policy development and citizen engagement. And the two in this space, I think, really do go together. So I'll start with the sort of the challenge of making policy for the future, and this is an extract from a long-standing report which talks about the different ways of thinking about the future, and governments often plan for the preferable future they would like to see, but it's really important that they look at those other plausible futures and even some things that might be not so desirable but definitely possible. And if nothing else, the coronavirus pandemic has taught us that those events can and do happen at times, and governments need to be prepared to respond. And so within government, a lot of what my service do is to try and improve our capability to do this. And so obviously a partnership with Digital Jersey and understanding the work that they do with forward-thinking people like Joel and others is exactly what we should be doing. There's lots of challenges we see coming towards us, and there's lots of things we're grappling with already, and Jersey's no different to this. We all understand the incremental impacts of climate change, but being able to respond to that and being able to build the coalition of politicians and local people, businesses, and government that are needed to make action is often challenging, particularly when there are urgent things in the here and now that need to be dealt with. I'll return to that shortly. We know there are other drivers of big change in the world. There's a shift in the sort of political reality. There's a new populist governments coming through. There's a shift of influence towards actors like China and away from some of the settled state we've seen over the past 50 years, 70 years since the Second World War. There's the rise of big data. We've talked a lot about this recently, and this impacts on all businesses. I think there was a session previously about the economy is tech, and I think certainly if it's not tech, it's certainly data. We all produce data. The actions we take now leave data imprints, and organizations and places and governments that can get a handle on how to manage that and how to appropriately get the benefits from that will definitely prosper in the future. There's a trend globally towards urbanization. We see more sustainable land use forms. We see more productive, thriving communities where people live close together. But we need to create those places in a way which is good for the planet, good for the environment, and good for the people who live there as well. So these are some of the big challenges. And one of the ones I think particularly relevant to this conversation, and this is a framing that I've borrowed from an organisation we're working with called the New Citizenship Project, and a guy I know well called Jon Alexander, who talks very convincingly and about a shift from the subject kind of framing through a consumer framing that we've perhaps lived with back into an active citizen framing. And if we think about citizens in this way as active participants in their place, in their government and in their policy outcomes, then that starts to give us an idea of how tools such as digital twins and projects that make use of smart data that can arise from some of the technologies and projects that we've been talking about this week really starts to come together in the second half of what I'm going to talk to you about. And so with all those things going on, with these shifts, some of which are visible, some of which are invisible, some of which are happening in other places, but all of which are happening in particularly unique flavors to each place. And somewhere like Jersey as an island obviously has its own very sort of unique take on many of these trends and how it responds to them and the opportunities it has to get the best from them. We try and make plans, we try and make policies, and often long-term policy was thought to be about kind of certainty of direction, big goals, big aims, and sticking to your guns, making sure you delivered on those promises. And there is definitely an element of the importance of the clarity of the mission, the vision, what you're trying to achieve that can energize people right across a place. But equally, given everything we've just said about the nature and pace of change and how complicated life is becoming, the need for governments to be able to respond, the need for governments to be able to be agile in these big choices is also really, really important. And so we're stuck with a whole sort of world of complexity that policymakers try and grapple with, and so we put together plans, as I say, and then almost inevitably, having done a lot of work, researched a lot of things, tried to understand what's going to happen, tried to make some educated guesses about the future, we go forth and make a proposal and seek to act, and we kind of run into the first sort of big law of strategy, which is, something always happens. There's always an event that changes your outlook, that changes your understanding, and you're back into reevaluation and reconsidering and trying to start out in the right direction again. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how that is coming together in Jersey in our response to climate change, and some of the steps we're taking that can help create an environment in which digital twin capability and visual data can really help us to succeed and tackle what is undoubtedly possibly the biggest challenge we all face together at the moment. So a little backstory, Jersey in 2019, through its state's assembly, declared a climate emergency, huge political support to recognise the need to act. And we were asked to bring forward rapidly a serious plan to look at how Jersey could become carbon neutral by 2030, which is a massive ambition and something we're still working on understanding and potentially enshrining. But undoubtedly, we've had to make a start on thinking about how you grapple with such a major social change. So any advanced timeline to carbon neutrality requires huge changes to technologies, huge changes to people's living styles, the choices they make when they get up in the morning. How do they travel? How do they heat their homes? How do they consume? What sorts of things do they put their support behind? And in order to try and build a foundation for this level of change, something which can sustain through the challenges of the years to come. And we didn't have the pandemic in mind when we started thinking about those sort of challenges, but it is a very good example. But there will be economic ups and downs, there will be technology shifts, there will be those geopolitical shifts that I talked about before. And if we want to sustain action throughout that sort of a period, then we really need a broad base of support. We need to try and encourage a kind of a social movement where people own not just the end goal and can say, yes, carbon neutral is important to us and important to me, but own their own actions and decisions that are necessary to deliver on that. And so our approach, our strategy, which was published at the end of last year, is what we call a people-powered strategy. And it's one in which the government actively is trying to open up its process of understanding what we should do and how we should do it in a very sort of transparent way. So it's not seeking expert solutions, it's seeking collective solutions. And they need to be informed by expertise, but they need to be owned collectively. And as a result of that, we're bringing forward a large-scale engagement phase. We will be working with all sorts of community groups, with local parishes, with businesses, with others in the island, in order to try and evolve a conversation about what it might mean to be carbon neutral in Jersey, how we might get there, what people would have to do, and what roles each of us, including government, appropriately should take. And that will feed into a major citizens assembly in spring of 2021, and hopefully through that process we'll alight on some concrete proposals that have a lot of legitimacy. There's one of the things I'm going to get on to say when I bring this back to digital twins, is that acting in this way, acting in these big spaces, these big strategic spaces, whether that be the sort of infrastructure investment that Joel was talking about, shifting the airport by a kilometre, building bridges, making major investments that have major sort of impact on our sort of natural and built environment. The foundations on which those decisions are taken are absolutely fundamental to their success. So we can engineer those things, but if we change our mind halfway through because we didn't do the necessary kind of public due diligence at the start, we didn't take people with us, then we struggle very much to deliver those big choices. And that's particularly the case in a small place like Jersey, where we have very finite resources, and these choices are very significant. They impact on everybody's life. They can't be redone. They shouldn't be got wrong. And so with carbon neutral, if it's to mean anything for us, it has to be based on that broad and legitimate support, so that a recommendation can go through and then the political leadership can do their appropriate role and make the decisions. So in this space, if we're going to open up these conversations, then access to data, access to expertise is really important. The traditional policymaking I guess tension is between people who have access to data and expertise, who tend to be within government. And you would go to university, you would go to school, you would study civil engineering, you would study environmental science and other things, and you would work in these roles, and you would be employed to be the expert. I think we've moved on significantly from that now. People understand that we have to balance that expertise with public understanding, and in many ways make that expertise the servant of that public understanding and insight, because these are people who will live with these choices potentially for the rest of their lives. And we can see this in respect of major planning decisions. This is the Toronto Planning Panel, which is a participatory, effectively citizens panel that consider large-scale planning decisions in Toronto. And people are looking at bringing participation into decision making in all sorts of ways across the world. They are experimenting with different forms of democracy, of deliberation, and trying to strengthen and support the existing structures we have in our representative assemblies. we try similar things locally, internally. We work in a very sort of participatory way with people to understand, what we might want from the future. And part of that is trying to get an early access to understanding about what might hinder a project. So we heard Joel talk earlier about their simulations around the development of a bridge and some of the challenges that threw up. That's exactly the same thing we're trying to get to in a qualitative way through these processes. And so the two techniques very much go hand in hand. In this model, we already make use of a 3D model for planning purposes in Jersey, and colleagues in the government that have developed that have made that available in order that people can understand the impact of proposed developments. And I think that kind of brings me to my final sort of conclusions. And I've taken a long way around because in many ways, I think it's quite intuitive, the value that digital twins have for participatory policymaking and citizen engagement, but hopefully trying to show some of the context of that will help. But it makes the data more transparent. And if it's transparent, people can access it, they can understand it, but crucially, they can trust it. I think it makes data and understanding more accurate. People can point out where it's not right. That's not what happens in the real world. Investment in data infrastructure, is always going to sort of create cost benefits in the future. It's going to help governments make decisions quicker and better, and opening that up to the public is going to help in all those sorts of ways. We can play with scenarios and look at alternatives, which are crucial to building public trust. I think people like to understand that the alternatives are being considered, and this choice is the right choice, not just because we say so, but because we've looked at what else might happen. It helps to build participation, and in unlocking the views of people as they access this kind of expert data, it really can lead to a degree of innovation that governments should be quite comfortable in accepting they don't have the kind of the inside track or the monopoly on. So lots of opportunity to bring visual quantified data together with that citizen expertise, hosted and supported in participatory exercises such as the examples I've given you already. And that's why we're really pleased, particularly my team, to be working very closely in partnership with Digital Jersey and the access they can get us to organisations and initiatives such as the ones you've been hearing about this week, and it all helps to try and make progress in the best way for the people in the place of Jersey. Thank you.
Steve, you've taken me by surprise there. I wrote it down straight away. A people-powered solution. It feels like you're leading a charge of a Jedi mind shift inside governments about how stuff is done.
Well, I think there's always been an acceptance within governments that these big, particularly sort of environmental and infrastructure decisions should be open to public input, should be open to citizen involvement. I think the ways you can do that, the tools you have now, and the expectation that people have through that citizen shift of active participation changes that dynamic. So I think it's there. We're just trying to turn it up.
When it comes to the use of my data, the citizens' data, I accept, as we've heard all morning, this data effectively goes into a big pot and is anonymised. So you don't know it's Gary Burgess walking down the high street at 2:17 p.m. wearing his yellow socks, but it goes into that pot. How do you bring islanders with you? Because every time we talk about this, there are people who instantly just get quite tetchy and come out in hives at the thought of it.
There are, I think so. I don't yet think we have the right institutions and practices to really make the best of that. So I think you're absolutely right. People don't necessarily trust governments with their data. I've done some research previously, which showed that if you ask people, who do you trust with your data, particularly in the public services, they might trust the doctor, they might trust the police, they certainly don't trust the civil servant. And yet when you say, would you allow me to share your data in order that the prevalence of domestic abuse can be challenged and children can be supported who may be in an abusive household, they're more likely to say yes. Would you let me share your data in order that emergency services can respond more quickly to a fire? They would say yes. And so a lot of it is about showing the public good. So private companies have been able to monetize people's data because they give something back. So people get something back and they understand the benefit of that. Governments, I think, need to be better at telling that benefit story, but also they do need to be better at the security of data and the transparency of data and the governance.
I just wonder right now, very specifically in Jersey, whether there is a new tool in your armory that's helping get that message across. And that is, I mean, last time I checked, it was around 34,000 people had downloaded the Jersey COVID alert. And actually, they are people who get that they're in control of their data, and actually the wider pooled data is for the greater good.
That's absolutely right. I think the app's a really good example of some of the basic principles I think we should cleave to if we're going to ask citizens of the island to share their data, even in a very limited way as the app requires, and that is it should be decentralized. You should be completely in control. You choose to share, but also that we have a really clear story about what the public good is. So there's loads of data that you have that would help people like me do our jobs better. And if our job is to try and create the right outcome for the place that would end up benefiting you, whether that's the information about how you travel, information about the things you choose to buy and how you spend your time, how healthy you are, how happy you are. And we haven't quite yet got the right balance of power, I think, in the, those are your that's your knowledge, that's your data, and I ask, I guess, humbly for it, and we'll treat it very carefully. And that's not quite, I think, how people see it at the moment. But with the app, I think we've really got that understanding. People know it's going to help keep them safe and collectively, therefore, keep everybody safe.
And it comes back fundamentally to trust, doesn't it? And I think we're seeing that with this app as well, very well explained what it is and particularly what it isn't. And that then fosters trust and adoption, and people become ambassadors for the product by sharing it with other people. I wonder fundamentally when it comes to all of this data, you've got the public data, you've got the privately held data, and there might be a bit of an air gap between the two. How do you bridge that gap so that you're getting the full picture?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, at the moment, private data plays a role in a number of these schemes, primarily because it's better aggregated by private companies. If you gave me your telephone, your GPS information voluntarily, in control of it, and on an understanding of what we as government might do with it, then we wouldn't necessarily need to work in the same way with the telcos. We would still want to work with them, but their role as an intermediary would be different. And I think as part of the shift, I think I hope we'll see. I expect we will see, whereas people develop that idea of a personal data store, their ownership and where they choose to utilization of their data, whether that be for monetary purposes or for public good, is something that I think we'll see evolve over the next decade.
And actually, let's drill down on that monetizing of data. Data is there and is around the world being commercialized. There are businesses who need to pay the bills, quite frankly. When government is part of that equation, are you in any way queasy about that, totally comfortable about that, or even considering yourselves how to commercialize that as well to help balance the books as a government?
So I think the last point would be the wrong place to start.
Thought you might say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't see. So at the moment, I think a lot of people are queasy, and I wouldn't say I was queasy, but I would be very skeptical because I don't think we have again built the capabilities that you would need to be able to enter in quite a complex relationship like that in a way that was sufficiently transparent and trustable in order to kind of be proper. But we heard earlier in the week about concepts such as data foundations and new legal vehicles of guardianship and data custodianship that might provide some of that. And I certainly think we should try and find the ways of framing that sharing of data properly, because at the end of the day, the sorts of challenges we may be able to solve are of huge public benefit. So if we can help children to turn up at school ready to learn in a way that they aren't always, they can be more productive citizens in the future. If we can solve some of those big infrastructure challenges using some of the examples that Joel gave, we can make best use of taxpayers' money. So we all stand to benefit. It's worth making the effort to try and find the frames that can forge a partnership between public and private data, but I'm not quite sure we're there yet.
Let's look into your crystal ball. This is all about the here and now, but actually, no, we're talking a lot about the future already. We've heard a lot this week, and particularly this morning, about the foresight around the rollout of fibre. I mean, this is world-leading stuff that I take for granted. That's why this week is a bit of a shake of my Etch-a-Sketch. Go, hang on a minute. No. This is incredible. You cannot take this for granted. Most people on the planet do not have this stuff. Even many places that claim to have it, the final few meters is attached by a length of string to get to the house. It's not really fiber. Well, we have it all here. What's next? I mean, that was big vision stuff that was ahead of the curve. There was a lot of pushback. It took political bravery as well as policy bravery. What's the next big thing?
So I think I would probably guess, and it would be a guess rather than a prediction, that it would be something more around intellectual infrastructure, soft infrastructure. And this is an issue I think Jersey is grappling with and needs to continue to grapple with. So access to effectively the understanding of emerging data technologies and artificial intelligence, and access to an understanding that can help the place and our sort of our industries to adopt those, not in a way that makes their current practice more efficient necessarily, because I think there's a lot of that you can access on the market already, but in a way that helps to spot what the next industry is. Taking us back to the conversation the other day with Joe and the idea of different sort of data governance industries and the evolution of financial and professional services, perhaps. I think we need to think about how we get access to that in an island without a university, without some of the access to R&D that you might have. We've been very good at attracting talent to Jersey. Let's look at the analogy of that and attract the intellectual talent that is at the forefront of the data revolution.
You love this, don't you?
It's the most interesting part of my job.
And it must be frustrating because you want to do all this today, and I'm, with my work hat off, just as an islander, it fills me with so much encouragement that there is someone like you in your position really wanting to drive this forward. Is it frustrating that you want all this now, but reality means you can't have this all today?
So I think it frustrates a lot of people. They tend to work outside of government, so there's a natural need to be able to accept that foundations are built slowly, and governments have to think very seriously and properly about these things. I'm comfortable with that. That's why I do my job rather than perhaps Joel's job or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think we see great foundations here been laid, not just in the infrastructure, but in the organizational ecology. So Digital Jersey and the different roles they've taken. Their next 5-year strategy, I think, is going to be really important for the island, but equally the other industry bodies that they work very closely with, and some of our major businesses as well as government. I think the conversation has evolved here. It goes in cycles and in iterations, and I think we're sort of ready for working out what the next big thing is. And I think everything I've seen since I arrived is that the political leadership understand the importance of this, will invest in it, and are actively seeking to understand where our sort of data economy can go.
Just finally, you mentioned 5-year plans there. I don't know if I'm meant to ask this or say this or put it to you, but we'll just go with this anyway. If you and I meet up at the end of this marble top surface in 5 years from now, is Jersey the smartest island on the planet?
Not by current definitions. There are places that have really stolen a march, and there are places we should learn from. I think it needs to be its own brand of smart island. I think that's about a smart citizenry as well as a smart city. It's not all in the infrastructure. It's not all in the big stuff. I think it could absolutely be one of the first places which has used smart technology to empower people to help achieve public good, that has used its existing skills and industries to preempt where some of those that parts of the economy might be going in the future. So it can be its own brand, but under our current definition, which I think is a little bit kind of tech heavy, a little bit sort of infrastructure heavy, and there are other places that have probably stolen a march, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be in the running, and it doesn't mean it's not a really important part of our future.
And I like that you didn't just say yes, because that roots this in the real world and gives us something to strive for. Steve, thank you so much for now. It's been absolutely fascinating. We've seen a fair bit of Steve this week, but it's nothing to how much we've seen of Joel during the course of this morning. Paging Joel, to use a bit of old technology. You are back. Are you still feeling smart, Joel? It's over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do promise this is the last time you'll see me this morning, but I am really pleased I can be with you and talk to you a little bit about not just about the projects I've been talking about in other countries, but come a little bit back to Jersey and also touch on a lot of those issues that we were just hearing from Steve. I think it is so important to have this transparency with data. It is so important that people understand how data is going to be used and they have their own ownership of it, and they have a return on investment for the time and the energy and the data that they are putting in. So it's very much about having a win-win. People don't want to be giving away data or even sharing data in any form if they can't see how it's used and how it's going to make life better for all of us together collectively. But this is where the digital twins come in. They allow us to show all of these things. And with the digital twins, we are developing the technology, but we have no interest in holding the data ourselves. The data is held by the companies, the individuals and the governments there. And that is very much why we're working with the United Nations on this, to make sure there is a transparency and a safety behind the way we work with data. We also, and it was very interesting, the last comments there we heard about how we can get to the solutions. There is a long way to go and there is a lot of things to be put in place, but we have a lot of data. I hear nearly every day people talk about big data. We can start to use that data to really make decisions and to be moving forward. And if we have a top-down approach where we use what we've got and then fill in more as we go along, we can really move things forward. But I'm going to start off and I'm going to take us back to the KPIs of Jersey. And although it's not filled in completely, I'm going to jump through them and go directly to bicycles. So here you see that we've put in the pins and we're showing all the EV bikes across the whole of Jersey. We're showing all the rental bikes across the whole Jersey, and we're able to show where it is today. So if you put all the EV bikes and all the hire bikes together, we're still not at a level which is the target level for the United Nations. But actually, with the planned developments EVie has for extra hire bikes or EV bikes within 2021, by mid-21, it looks like that you will be within the green area for electric bikes, which I think is a massive point to say that within just 2 years, you've gone from a red level to a green level within the shared bicycle area, and the uptake of them has been unbelievable. We've been able to look at the figures of the uptake, and it is actually quite a percentage when you compare it to the public transport you have today with buses and everything. That the uptake of the electric bicycles has shown a real need, but it is also a massive effect on the environment, and these effects have such large knock-on effects. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to go over to electric cars. Looking at Jersey from outside, you can't understand why electric cars haven't exploded in Jersey. It must be the perfect environment for electric car. You can't claim to have range anxiety in an island the size of Jersey. So we see there is an uptake, and you've had some really good first movers. And we heard a little bit about the Post, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Post. You've heard a little bit about the shared electric vehicles. But we're able to understand exactly what's going on with that. We're able to understand and look at the history, so we can understand the history of what's happened with electric take-up of vehicles. From 2011 all the way up to today, we've looked at the take-up and it's starting to explode. And then we've also seen within that the component of that which was the post office, and they were really good to be a first mover to push this forward. And actually, it's a total win-win. It's a good thing for the environment. It's a good move forward, but they've also made really good financial savings doing this. So it's giving a better solution and it's moving things forward. We then start to look at the projections. And as we heard from Steve, you can never quite be sure about projections. You've got to look at the different solutions and hope for them. And you may get that punch in the face that we heard from Steve, but we hope that we will be getting at least these sorts of projections looking forward. And this will change not just the CO2 projection, but it will also have fuel savings, but it'll have big knock-on effects to other areas. The requirement for import of fuel to Jersey will change. Currently, your electricity is on a direct connection to France and is produced in clean solutions through nuclear mainly. And that is giving you an energy source directly to the island based on a general clean fuel type setup. And you will change the full network by not needing to import huge amounts of fuel, and that will change how the ports need to work, but it will also change the transport setup behind that. So this shows you how all of these different components interlink. And that's the importance of having a digital twin, to understand how you can interlink all of these different components. So we can look at all of this, and we heard also in the video at the start, we heard about the air sensor data, and we were able to look at that air quality, and you actually are in a lucky situation that in Jersey, most of your air quality is very good. You have, because if you're near the coast, nothing to do with pollution, but because you're near the coast, you do have some issues with ozone, which is always higher near the coast, and being an island, you will always have that. But understanding exactly what's going on with the air quality throughout the city down to, or throughout the island down to a very small level, it is a very interesting part. And with that, we've had a very tight collaboration with AirSensor, the people who are providing the solutions, and it's able for us, again, to see the effects between take-up of electric vehicles, between less and less people using solid fuels in their houses, and all of these things changing and how they all interconnect. So the e-car growth has actually had a big impact already on air quality. We're going to see more and more with the fuel and how that changes. And then I'm going to talk a little bit, and actually I'm going to pass over shortly to Steve from the Ports Authority, who is really pushing forward with being ready and understanding all of those different situations which can come up and how they will come up for looking at the future of ports. Before I do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the work with ports, but not just ports. Start off with the airport, and we're actually been very pleased through Digital Jersey to have a very tight connection with Ports of Jersey to be able to look at different solutions. And I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the airport and airport regeneration. So we're able to take architectural drawings with all of the details, and we're able to bring them directly into the full digital twin of the whole city. So directly out of a standard CAD package, we're able to take those drawings and set them up and deliver them directly across, save them in a format. So it's simple. So not only we can do it, but people directly using the software can do it within Jersey themselves. So you don't need to come back to us at all, but you can actually be playing around and testing through different scenarios. So it allows very quick test scenarios. So here we see we're putting in the plans of the new airport. We directly place it into the situation, and we can look at any aspects of it, and we can basically play around just as you would with Lego, but in a real world environment, to understand exactly what is going to go on and discuss all the different items and have that public engagement, to have that engagement with all the different teams and really move things forward. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've also used this data within the marine port. But before I do that, I'd like to pass over to Steve Tanner, who's actually talked a little bit about what's really going on with the port. And he is absolutely a man with a plan, as I've heard him be introduced to before. And it is really exciting what's going on there. And we're really pleased that we can help to try and push things forward. But I'm going to pass over to a video of Steve talking a little bit about what's going on with the port and what the trends are in the future. So over to Steve.
So one of the key parameters for Ports of Jersey in understanding what it invests any money into going forward is going to be the key drivers for why you make that investment, which is in terms of what does it mean for our customers, what does it mean for Ports of Jersey, why it's the right things to invest in, particularly as we go through very difficult times as we have with COVID of late. So the value of where we invest money is ever more important to us. So making the right decisions has become, as you would imagine, always was critical, but it's becoming more and more critical for us as a business. Going back now a few years, what we've been looking at as a business is where are the key drivers for investment into the harbour, and part of that process has been understanding how the harbour works, how our customers, how our clients, how they all use the harbour, how we can better enable the infrastructure to deliver a much better product for customers, but more importantly safeguard the harbour for a long time to come. So we've been looking at a 25-year plus horizon, measuring a lot of data over the last few years to understand how freight is moving, the changes in freight, changes in the types of freight that are coming to the island, sort of the importation of vehicles, importation of waste, export of waste and product as well, stuff like that. But importantly, we're seeing some significant changes that we know are coming up, things like sand and aggregates. Whilst aggregates has quite along life on the island, one of the things we've been particularly looking at is around sand. So there's a lot of sand used in construction on the island, and there's quite a lot of construction planned for the island, not just in Ports of Jersey's developments over the next few years, but equally lots of developments across the island. So some of the stuff that we've been doing is gathering data with respect to the volume of freight and the type of freight and how it comes in. So there's lots of different ways that things can come in. They can come in the back of lorries, as you would imagine. They can come in containerized form. They can come in bulk form. And there's lots of different ways we need to think about how we handle freight on the island. And one of the key things has been particularly around Ro-Ro. So it is the area where most freight comes to the island. And some of the work that we've been doing has enabled us to understand that some of our capacity constraints are actually around Elizabeth, particularly. So whilst we have no particular issue with the volumes that the vessels that come into the island can handle, the ramps themselves, things like that, there's no problem with anything like that. Where we do have an issue is with respect to the space that's available to us in Elizabeth. So a lot of the work that we've done has helped us identify that we don't have enough trailer parking slots, we don't have enough warehousing, and we don't have enough capacity within the Elizabeth area for the increasing capacity that is coming through Ro-Ro. There's a perceived maximum capacity of around 300,000 tonnes of freight a year through Elizabeth, perhaps just a tiny bit more. And actually over this last few months, 12 months perhaps, we've seen that significantly exceeded up to around 340,000 tonnes, which is helping us recognise where we have particular pinch points with freight. So we find ourselves spilling out of Elizabeth, if you like. And what tends to happen is a lot of freight then tends to move around onto New North Quay, and the demurraging of freight actually occurs in those areas. What that means for the island is actually there's quite a lot of movement of vehicles that creates an impact to the environment. It creates an impact to us just from not just purely a carbon emission, but actually vehicles moving, people moving around those areas, additional noise, lots of things that we want to try and avoid. And a lot of the work we've been doing, and it's particularly useful when we start considering how we can input that into the digital twin, because that enables us to model vehicle movements and model the impacts of some subtle changes that enables less movements, what that means from an environment perspective and what that means to the public at large. So what we've been looking at is an opportunity to consolidate our lift on, lift off freight, which is the freight that you see being craned off vessels on New North Quay, and our roll on, roll off freight. So the stuff that comes on the ferries in Elizabeth. At the moment, they're handled in two different areas, and you see quite a lot of movement between those two areas, from Elizabeth around to New North Quay and vice versa. Then the onward movement of those containers or those vehicles onto other destinations on the island. So there is an impact from an environmental perspective. There's an impact from a storage perspective, which is why we're moving these things. And the data is enabling us to understand where we see the particular pinch points and what times of year we see those pinch points. Up until recently, what we've not been able to do is model that. Other than we can see conceptually that there's an impact, but with the digital twin we're able to look at that in a much richer level of detail with things. So one of the first things we've been doing is using the data to understand why we have those issues. Some of the big issues have been particularly around perceived capacity, as I said, at Elizabeth, actually New North Quay. There's always been a feeling that perhaps New North Quay didn't have enough capacity. What the data has shown us is that from a freight perspective, there is more than enough capacity for the lift on, lift off freight that does come in. At the moment, we're far less in terms of movement of freight on New North Quay than we had done in previous years. We're seeing much less movement, but we still know that even with the additional movements that we used to have, the New North Quay has probably around 20 or 30,000 tonnes of spare capacity on it. The real pinch point is Elizabeth. Co-locating the two will enable us to start thinking about, well, how do we better move the freight around just one area? How much freight capacity do we need from a storage perspective? How much changes do we need to make to the road infrastructure? Things like trailer parking slots. How does the road network happen around the actual Elizabeth terminal itself? That enables us to make better decisions with respect to design and layout. And some of the stuff that's available as a result of the work that we've done now is just that recognition of what are the future freight requirements. So just doing some quite simple data analysis that allowed us to project forward on island capacity with respect to what do we expect is going to happen to population in future years, What are the trends we've seen in freight over the last few years? What's decreasing in respect of exports? What's increasing in respect of imports? And looking forward to things like what infrastructure developments are going to happen on the island, which enables us to start predicting what significant increases that we might see with respect to the construction freight on the island. What we've recognised is a trend that says, today we're in the region of around 580,000 tonnes of freight coming to the island in all different types of forms, be it for the food that goes into your shops, or as I say, construction materials coming to build all the new infrastructure that the island's demanding at the moment, down to just your general goods, your Amazon shopping and things like that, which has increased quite significantly through COVID. Looking forward, though, and projecting that across 25 years, we also know there will be further changes. So, as I said before, sand importation is going to be a particular big interest for us, because it means a minimum of an extra 70,000 tonnes a year that we think certainly through the next few years. Aggregates aren't a big issue for the island at this moment in time, because we can still continue to mine aggregates on the island. But if we start forward winding a number of years, in the event that aggregate is required to be imported, and we are seeing some import of aggregates, the island can consume anywhere from around 200,000 tonnes a year. When we start thinking about bigger developments like we have at Horizon, when we have the stuff that we will do at the harbour, things like airport development, other housing developments that the island will need with the shortage that it has, we could probably predict that will increase perhaps more than we're trending at this moment in time. So using that data, we're able to start thinking about where do we need to create capacity and how would we do that. Okay, so a lot of the design work that we're doing at the moment has now been passed through to the team to put into the digital twin. So that's helping us understand how the business will operate in the future, and particularly with respect to ongoing maintenance, life expectancy of assets. And a lot of our data actually is going into some of our newer systems, so our EAM system, our enterprise asset management system, looking at how we invest in lifetime costs of our assets once they're invested. So they're helping us make the decisions into the right product once we know we need to do something in the first place. And using the twin enables us to understand where better to place infrastructure, how we need to think about road infrastructure, simple things like where's the most logical place for crossing points. Whilst it might seem a fairly easy thing for us to predict, actually when you start to model some of the data and you start to see how vehicles move, particularly, you start to understand more logical flow of people. And what the model will allow us to do is start to think, well, how do people more naturally behave in those areas rather than us just guessing? So we start to make sure we put key infrastructure in the right places. So trying to summarise where the real benefit of the digital twin is for Ports of Jersey, it's enabling us to, firstly, to make better decisions. I think is probably primarily what I would say is the real benefit, not just better decisions for Ports of Jersey, but better decisions for the island and the public. It's enabling us to pull multiple data sets, multiple decision-making tools into one environment that's pretty agile and something that we can work with really quickly, much more advanced than we would have ever been able to achieve through more traditional design methodologies. And it's enabling us to start thinking about the finished product, and it's enabling us to then see that in operation and understand how that really is impacting, and will it impact in the context that we expected. It isn't always a given that we'll design something and through the modelling that we've done that we're able to pull all those data sets together accurately in traditional design methodology and understand the true impact. What this tool is going to enable us to do is understand multiple different impacts and make sure that we make the right decisions from the outset, rather than having design iteration changes as we start to develop, or indeed completing developments and understanding that there are things that we need to change into the future and having further works. So the tool is enabling us to make the right decisions at the right time, right from the outset, and that's a really important facet for us as a business, as I say, particularly the island.
Okay, thank you very much there, Steve. As you can see, working with the port is a very complex setup. There is so many things involved, and that is just one component of the total island. And we're able to work with the port to really look at how we can bring all these things together. Now, what's interesting for us is taking it from this stage and actually modelling things. And as you heard from Steve, they were looking at the roll-on, roll-off type capacities, and they were also looking at the low-load capacities. And it was very clear to see when looking at the data that the roll-on, roll-off capacities is something which really needs to be looked at and understood in more detail, so we can go into that data sets. But what I really want you to take from this talk is understanding how tools like digital twins, not just digital twins, but tools like digital twins, which allow us to connect data together to humans, to be that interface between humans, allow us to see, as I go back to the beginning, how every piece in that chessboard is working. If we imagine the port as one single piece, obviously they can be making their plans on how they're going to make step forwards and how they're going to move. But if they can't see every other piece in the game, how are they going to be able to make good decisions? So what we want to be able to do with the digital twins and with this data and with everything else together is being able to basically take Jersey, basically have that, instead of that being the chessboard as the interface to the people. So, and not just having one piece. So not just having the port as one piece that we have a digital twin of, but we slowly build up the digital twins of all of the different components at different levels, and we're able to see the big picture and understand how we can put all of these things together to make sure that we're making the right decisions for a better quality of life for all of the people on the island, to have it so it's nicer to live there and things work in a more smooth way, and also make sure we can hit those environmental goals and those directives we have in the future. It should be that we can come to a situation where we have a win-win, where we manage to live in a sustainable way in the future, but also have a very nice and improving quality of life more and more into the future. So I'm going to pass back over to Gary now, and I really hope you've picked up some ideas.
Joel, thank you so much. Ending with a game of digital chess. It is checkmate for you, but it's far from game over on this story as we talk about our smart islands today. Let's wrap up some of the thoughts of this morning with Dara McDermott, the MD of JT. Goodness, that's a lot of initials in one row. Dara, well, first of all, let's start in big picture terms. What a morning and what a week.
It was amazing, to hear, from all the potential uses that we can make of the infrastructure that's in place, to hear about the things that are being done. I think it's been absolutely fascinating.
I can frame this question two ways. I can say it's all thanks to you, or it's all your fault, by which I mean there's a lot of pressure because we've just learned this week either the veins and the arteries in the body or the infrastructure that everything's hung on ultimately comes down to what you guys are doing.
Well, I think that's the case, but you need connections. Okay, and when we put, we've spoken a lot about fiber, about mobile, about LoRa networks, and so on. Connections are hugely important, but they're the obvious things that people see, that people blame when something doesn't work. But actually, it's the stuff at either end that is the next bottleneck. We've essentially removed what was a data bottleneck by putting those networks in place. We made a commitment, when we finished the fiber rollout a few years ago, we made a commitment that basically said, we think we have the best networks in the world. Do your best, go mental, go nuts, do what you can. If you come across something more that you need, we as the kind of as the operator in Jersey, we will commit to investing in that to make it happen. So don't ever consider that networks are a bottleneck, and look at what comes next. So we've seen data. We've seen the huge, we've seen what Joel has spoken about this morning, the huge use that you can put data to. And now I think, we have ways of getting that data. We have ways of analyzing it. But now you got to get on to making good decisions that are, as Joel just said there, in the interest of a sustainable future and in the interest of a better quality of life for everyone here.
But let's just rewind a few years. We're only here because of some vision and bravery. The rollout of fibre in Jersey, I remember at the time, was very controversial, was not easily won, yet here we are now thinking it's just a normal part of life.
It's true, and that's down to quite a number of people, and success as many fathers and mothers as we all know. But again, I think if you roll it back, it kind of links to what I said a second ago, which is you got to take brave decisions. And we've seen a lot of debate in Jersey over any number of programs or projects that you can think of. Sometimes a decision that's even questionable, but 90% right and based on fact, based on opportunity, sometimes you got to go for it and then make use thereafter.
I feel like we want more of this, don't we? We want more bravery, we want more vision, and also we are now in a position where we've got so much more data we can even visualize to help policymakers, political leaders see the opportunity and then most importantly grasp the opportunity. Dara, listen, we're out of time for our morning session. Just one final thought from you. What's the next big thing for you, for JT and for Jersey? What is it you want us to know?
Oh, the same as everybody else now, what we're focused on is making use of the infrastructure, believe it or not. The infrastructure is in place, works, runs, almost box ticked, okay? There'll always be a little bit of evolution and further investment, but now JT, the same as others, are making use of that. So you heard Jon Collinson speak earlier on about the 01 program of, making smarter homes. We've just launched a product a few weeks ago called Plume, which brings kind of phenomenal Wi-Fi into the property. So we're just dealing with those things as well to make use of the infrastructure that we've rolled out.
Love it. Learned an awful lot this week, as I keep saying, and it all comes full circle, doesn't it?
It does.
The stuff that you've put in place, everyone is benefiting from it in one way or another. Dara, for now, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time this morning. And that is our morning session done here at Jersey Tech Week. But we have one more session to go this afternoon from 3 o'clock. I'm really looking forward to this. Let's take a look at the lineup for what's in store this afternoon at 3. We will be launching the Jersey Tech Awards, and we have more categories than ever before. We will find out more about that this afternoon. We'll also be getting some final thoughts from Tony Moretta, reflecting on what we've learned over the past few days. So much to fit in there, so I'm not sure how we're going to go about that. And then we'll be revealing the winners of the Digital Design Challenge as well. So all of that is coming up this afternoon. If you're not yet registered to watch, get yourself onto the website. That is digital.je/techweek. We started the morning with me on my bike, feeling very smart about this island. For now, someone's just said in my right ear, on your bike. I'm off. Goodbye.